If someone had told me 5 years ago that I'd lose everything in one day, I would have laughed. I was the guy people called steady. A surgeon with a clean record, a big house, and a family everyone envied. On paper, I had everything a man could want. But paper burns fast. My name's Dr. Ryan Hale, trauma surgeon, Chicago. I used to think saving lives meant something, that it made you untouchable. Turns out, reputation is as fragile as the people you try to save. I met Claire in medical school. She was sharp, confident, the kind of woman who never had to ask for attention. Her father, Judge Leonard Easton, didn't like me from day one. I wasn't old money. I was the scholarship kid from Joliet who fixed cars to pay tuition. Claire said it didn't matter. I believed her. For a while, life really did feel like a movie. Long hours, shared dreams, a daughter who looked like both of us. I thought I'd finally outrun my past. But rich families have long memories, especially when you make them feel small. It started the year I got promoted to head of trauma at Mercy General. Suddenly I was doing interviews, my name in journals. Claire's father couldn't stand it. He'd always wanted her to marry someone strategic, not someone who had to earn his own parking spot. Still, I ignored the tension. Until the day Claire stopped coming home. It was subtle at first. Late nights, new perfume, laughter that didn't belong to me echoing through her phone. When I finally asked, she just stared at me and said, "You've changed. Ryan, you've become someone I don't recognize." That's what she told the lawyers too, that I'd grown volatile and distant. Within weeks, divorce papers hit my desk like a diagnosis I didn't deserve. The final blow came 6 months later. I was accused of negligence in a high-profile case, a senator's son who died on my table. I did everything right, but somehow records disappeared. Witnesses changed stories, and the hospital temporarily suspended me while the board reviewed. I knew who was behind it. Leonard Easton, a retired judge with too much influence and too much pride. He didn't just take my career. He took my name. In a single year, I went from Dr. Hale, respected trauma chief, to Ryan, the disgraced ex-husband renting a one-bedroom above a bar. My daughter Lila stopped calling. I'd call her every Sunday. She'd answer with a polite, "Hi, Dad," then rush off. It hurt, but I told myself she needed time. Everyone I knew moved on. Colleagues avoided eye contact. Friends offered awkward sympathy and disappeared. I started driving part-time for a rideshare app just to pay rent. At night, I'd scroll through news articles about the hospital expansion I was supposed to lead. My name was gone from the credits. I was nobody again. Then one night, everything changed. In the smallest, strangest way. It was raining hard, and I got a ping for a late pickup in Lincoln Park. When the door opened, an older man climbed in, well-dressed, silver hair, the kind of presence that made you straighten your posture. He looked at me through the rearview mirror. "Ryan Hale?" he asked. "Yes, sir," he smiled faintly. "You look just like your father." I almost slammed the brakes. "Excuse me?" He chuckled softly. "We worked together once. Long time ago. He was a good man. Did he ever tell you about the foundation?" "What foundation?" The man smiled again, almost kindly. "I see. Then maybe it's time you found out what he left behind." When I turned to ask what he meant, he was already stepping out, into the rain, disappearing into the night like a memory I'd forgotten. I didn't know it then, but that single conversation would open the door to a past I never knew existed, and to the truth that would rebuild my life from the ashes my ex's family thought they'd buried me under. The next morning, I drove to the address he'd left on my dashboard, not realizing that what waited there wasn't closure. It was the beginning of my redemption. The address was scribbled on the back of an old business card. St. Vincent's Community Center, 1984 W. Belmont. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. That neighborhood had been dying since the 90s. But curiosity beat cynicism. And by noon, I was standing in front of a cracked red brick building with a faded sign that read, "Hale Trust Foundation." My father's last name. My name. The door creaked when I pushed it open. The air smelled like dust, paint, and something older. Maybe memory. Inside, 2 women were stacking files on metal shelves. One of them looked up. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm not sure," I said. "I was told to come here." "My name's Ryan Hale." Her expression softened instantly. "Oh, you're his son," I blinked. "Whose son?" "Dr. Thomas Hale," she said. "He started this place 40 years ago. We keep it going in his honor." My throat went dry. "My dad was a small-town physician. He couldn't have run anything like this," she smiled sadly. "That's what everyone thought. But this center, this trust, was his second life. He funded it quietly under an alias. Free medical care for low-income families. Scholarships for young doctors who couldn't afford school. All from anonymous donors, except—" She trailed off, walking to a dusty cabinet. She pulled out a folder labeled Ryan. "He left this one with your name on it. Said his son would come for it one day." I took the folder. My hands were shaking. Inside were records of deposits, old photos, and a letter. The handwriting stopped me cold. It was his, neat, mechanical, every curve disciplined. "Ryan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I know I wasn't much of a father. I was too proud to tell you about this place while you were young. I wanted you to build your own name. But I always feared what power and money do to good men. This trust exists to protect you from that. Everything in here is yours to guide, not to own. If you ever lose your way, come back here. It's where the Hales begin again." I read the letter 3 times. It didn't make sense. He'd died when I was still in residency. A simple heart attack. We'd spoken the week before about golf, not legacies. He'd never mentioned this place. What happened to it? I asked the woman. "After he passed, the board kept it quiet," she said. "Your father left strict instructions that the trust wasn't to be commercialized. We've been running on what's left of the interest income, barely surviving, honestly." I walked through the halls after that, looking at the photos. My father with children, patients, volunteers, smiling in ways I'd never seen him at home. There was one picture of him standing beside the same man I'd picked up the night before. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, "For the future, Hale, when he's ready." That line stayed in my head all night. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I called a friend from med school, Marcus Shaw, a hospital administrator who still returned my calls when everyone else stopped. "Marcus, I need advice," I said. "I found something my father built. A non-profit clinic, maybe more. It's dying, but it's legitimate." He hesitated. "What's your plan?" "I want to restart it," I said. "Maybe under my license. Keep it free but modernize it. It might be the only thing left with my name that still means something." Marcus whistled. "You're serious." "Dead serious," he laughed softly. "All right. You'll need permits, funding, legal cleanup. But you know what, Ryan? Maybe this is how you get your life back. Not by fighting them, by rebuilding what they can't touch." His words hit me harder than I expected. That night, I sat in the tiny apartment I was renting, surrounded by paperwork and memories I didn't know existed until 24 hours ago. For the first time in years, I felt purpose again. Not anger, not bitterness. Purpose. The next morning, I filed paperwork to reclaim the Hale Trust Foundation as its new director. The process was brutal. Months of forms, verification, tax audits, skepticism. But slowly, it started coming together. I started recruiting volunteers, nurses, retired doctors, anyone willing to help. Some nights I slept on the clinic's couch. I didn't care. I wasn't doing this for status anymore. I was doing it for the man I should have known, and the man I still wanted to become. By the end of that first year, we had 2 small operating rooms running again. Word spread quietly. Families started showing up. People who'd been turned away from big hospitals. Every time I stitched a wound or signed a form, I could almost hear my father's voice. This is where the Hales begin again. For the first time in years, I believed it. But just when the foundation was finally standing, an old ghost came walking through the doors of my new clinic. And with her came the storm I thought I'd escaped forever. It was a Wednesday, the kind of day where everything feels quiet, almost peaceful. The clinic was finally steady. The smell of fresh paint still lingered in the halls, and the sound of laughter echoed from the children's waiting area. I was reviewing patient charts in my office when I heard a soft knock. "Dr. Hale?" One of the receptionists said from the doorway, her face uncertain. "There's someone asking for you. Says it's urgent. Who is it?" She wouldn't give her name. When I stepped into the hallway, I froze. Standing near the entrance, shoulders tense and eyes swollen from crying, was Claire, my ex-wife. Time had changed her. Not in the way that softens people, but the way that wears them down. She looked smaller somehow, the polished confidence gone. The woman who'd once walked out of my life like she was ascending to something better now, stood there looking lost. "Ryan," she said quietly. I didn't move. "You're a long way from the suburbs, Claire." She swallowed hard. "Can we talk, please?" "Just for a few minutes?" The nurses glanced at me, awkward. I nodded for them to give us privacy. We stepped into a side room, the old consultation office. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the fluorescent light filled the silence. Finally, she said, "I heard about this place. I didn't believe it until I saw your name outside." "It's real," I said. "Not everything tied to the name Hale dies quietly." She winced. "I deserve that." "Probably," she sat down, clutching her purse like it was a lifeline. "Ryan, I didn't come here to fight." "Then why are you here?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Because everything fell apart. I stayed quiet. She told me the story, how her father's investments had collapsed after a corruption scandal, how he'd been stripped of his pension and influence. The firm that her new husband Ethan had built went bankrupt when Leonard's name came up in the investigations. Claire had lost her house, her savings, and her reputation. "He's gone," she whispered. "Ethan left last year. I tried to keep things together for Lila, but she doesn't speak to me anymore." The irony hit me so hard I almost laughed. "I don't know where else to go," she said. "You're the only one who ever cared enough to stay calm when everything broke. I just need help." For a moment, I just looked at her, this woman who'd helped destroy me, sitting now in the clinic my father had built, asking for mercy. "You ruined me, Claire," I said, quietly but sharp enough to make her flinch. "You stood there while your father and your husband dragged my name through the mud. You let them do it." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I know, and I can't fix it. But I swear, Ryan, I didn't know they'd go that far. I just wanted out. I thought if I kept quiet, it would all pass." I leaned back in my chair, watching her. Every part of me wanted to turn her away. But another part, the one that had rebuilt itself on forgiveness and purpose, wouldn't let me. "What do you want from me?" I asked. She hesitated. "A job, anything. I have a background in administration. I can help here even if it's small. I just need a start." The request hung between us like a test I hadn't studied for. After a long silence, I said, "You'll start as a volunteer. No salary, no privileges. You report to the staff, not me." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. "Thank you." As she stood to leave, she whispered, "You're a better man than I ever gave you credit for." I didn't answer. For weeks after that, she came in quietly, working in records, sorting files, helping with patients. The staff liked her. I stayed distant, professional, but I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken history between us. Then one evening, while I was locking up, I found her sitting alone in the break room. Staring at a folder, she looked up, eyes red. "You should see this." It was an envelope. No return address, just my name in shaky handwriting. Inside was a faded photograph. My father, Judge Leonard Easton, and another man, sitting together at what looked like a board meeting table. On the back was written, "The deal that started it all." 1998. "What is this?" I asked. Claire shook her head. "I don't know. It came in the clinic mail. But the postmark is from Springfield." Springfield, where my father had worked just before he died. A strange chill went down my spine. "Whoever sent this knows something." Claire looked at me, frightened. "Ryan, what if what happened to you wasn't just your father's revenge or my father's corruption? What if it all started long before us?" I looked down at the photo, at the handshake frozen in time, and realized the truth might go deeper than betrayal or redemption. It might go all the way back to the beginning. The next morning, I drove to Springfield, not knowing that the man waiting for me there would finally reveal what really destroyed my family, and why my father had built the Hale Trust in the first place. The road to Springfield felt longer than it should have. I kept turning that photograph over in my hand at every red light. My father sitting beside Judge Easton and another man whose face I didn't recognize. They all looked pleased, like three men who'd just made a deal that would echo for decades. The further I drove, the heavier it sat in my gut. I'd spent years blaming Claire's father for everything that happened. But if my father was sitting at that same table, then the story wasn't as simple as betrayal. The Hale Trust record showed a Springfield branch address that had been inactive since 2002. When I pulled up to the building, it was nothing but a shuttered warehouse. Hale Medical Supply Depot barely visible on the old signage. The windows were covered in dust. I knocked anyway. After a minute, an old man in a caretaker's uniform cracked the door open. "We're closed," he muttered. "I'm looking for anyone who used to work here," I said. "My father, Dr. Thomas Hale, founded the trust." He studied my face, eyes narrowing. "You look like him. Come in." Inside smelled like oil, paper, and time. The caretaker's name was Ernie, and he'd been here since the early days. "I figured someone from the family would show up sooner or later," he said, pouring coffee into 2 chipped mugs. "Never thought it'd take this long." "What do you know about this place?" I asked. He sighed. "Your father and Judge Easton started it together. Back in the late 90s, they were part of a medical ethics board. But what they did here, it wasn't exactly legal," my heart thudded. "Illegal how?" Ernie reached into a drawer and pulled out a faded file. "They were running a side program, taking government medical grants meant for underprivileged clinics and funneling part of it through a shell company. The money was supposed to fund research, but most of it vanished. After a few years, your father found out Leonard was using it for political bribes, campaign donations, property deals, quiet favors." I felt my throat tighten. "You're saying my father was involved in that?" "At first, yes. He helped set it up, thinking it was a charitable expansion. But when he realized what Easton was doing, he tried to stop it. That's when things got dangerous. Not long after, he had that heart attack." I stared at the floor. My father's calm letter, his secret foundation, the lines about protecting me from power, they suddenly made sense. He hadn't just built the Hale Trust as charity. He'd built it as atonement. "Easton buried everything," Ernie said quietly. "Made it look like your father was just another silent partner. The other man in that photo, name's Reed, he turned state witness, died in a car crash 2 months later. A cold realization crawled up my spine. So my father tried to expose him. And that's why Easton came after me years later." Ernie nodded. "Reputation. He couldn't let a Hale rise again. You were the one loose thread. I left that warehouse shaking. Everything I'd believed about my downfall, that it was personal, about pride or family hate, it was deeper than that. It was about legacy, guilt, and a debt my father died trying to pay. That night, I drove back to Chicago and sat outside the clinic for hours. The lights glowed faintly behind the frosted glass. I thought about the chain of men before me. One who tried to build, one who tried to corrupt, one who tried to survive. The next morning, I walked into the office and told Claire everything. She cried silently through most of it. "He told me your father stole from him," she whispered. "He said you came from a family of liars." I believed him, Ryan. I looked at her. "You weren't the first person he fooled." We sat in silence. For once, there was no anger left, just understanding. A week later, I met with a journalist from the Tribune. Her name was Hannah Lee, one of the few reporters who still cared about truth more than headlines. I gave her everything. The files, the photo, the letter, the testimony from Ernie. "I don't want revenge," I told her. "I just want the truth on record," she nodded. "You'll have it. But this won't be clean. People will come after you." "They already did," I said. "They took everything. There's nothing left to take." When the story dropped 3 weeks later, it hit like a thunderclap. Judge Easton linked to 1998 medical fraud scandal. Old headlines resurfaced, new evidence poured in, and the entire city watched as a man once called the untouchable finally faced what he'd buried. The phone rang nonstop. Donors called, lawyers called. But the one call that stopped me cold came from a familiar number I hadn't seen in years. "Dad?" "It was Lila, my daughter." Her voice cracked. "I read the article. Mom told me everything. I didn't know what really happened. I'm sorry, my throat burned." "You don't owe me sorry, sweetheart. Just truth. I want to see you," she said. That night when she walked into the clinic, she didn't say a word. She just hugged me, hard like a child again. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. But as we sat together, I noticed an unmarked envelope slipped under my office door. No name, No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 5 words written in shaky cursive. He wasn't the only one. The past had just resurfaced again, and this time the secret it carried wouldn't just change my father's legacy. It would threaten everything I'd rebuilt from it. The envelope sat on my desk all night. I stared at those 5 words until the letters blurred. He wasn't the only one. They hit harder than any headline ever could. My father wasn't the only man who'd tried to make things right, or the only one destroyed for it. When morning came, I couldn't focus. The clinic buzzed with the usual rhythm. Phones ringing, nurses laughing, patients filing in. But my mind was elsewhere. Who sent the note, and what did it mean? Around noon, Marcus dropped by. He'd been following the news, his face carrying that cautious mix of pride and worry. "You stirred up a hornet's nest, Ryan," he said. "But damn, it needed stirring." I showed him the note. He frowned. "Could be someone trying to spook you." "Maybe, or maybe it's another witness," I said. "My father wasn't working alone. Someone else knew the truth." Marcus leaned back. "Then find them. But be careful. Power like Easton's doesn't die quietly." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the old caretaker, Ernie, and how he'd said the other man in the photo, Reed, turned state witness and died in a crash. But maybe there was someone else behind him, someone who stayed silent. I went back through the files from the Hale Trust archives. In one of the oldest folders, under donation receipts, I found a handwritten ledger entry. Donor J.R. Alden, 1999, $75,000 research fund. The name meant nothing to me, but the handwriting looked familiar. My father's careful, precise script had written approved. Beside it, a short note. "Keep his name off the record. He's done enough already." The next day, I ran the name through state archives. Dr. Jonathan Alden, former hospital director, retired. Address, Evanston, Illinois. I drove out there that same afternoon. His house was small, quiet, sitting under a canopy of oak trees. When he opened the door, he looked at me like he already knew why I'd come. "You're Thomas Hale's boy," he said. "Took you long enough." We sat at his kitchen table. He poured 2 glasses of water and didn't waste time. "Your father and I worked on that medical ethics board with Easton. We both believed we could reform how donations were handled, but Easton had other plans. Your dad figured it out before I did." "Why didn't you speak up?" I asked. "I did. Once they made sure no one listened. Easton had friends in every office that mattered. When your father started building that trust, it was his way of undoing what they'd done. He asked me to help funnel real funds, clean money, back into actual clinics. But when he died, I couldn't keep it going alone." He paused, eyes wet. "I should have come forward years ago. But when the judge went after you, I realized silence had turned me into him. I sat there trying to absorb it all. 2 men trying to do good, destroyed by one man's greed. Why contact me now?" I asked. He slid an old USB drive across the table. "Because I still have copies of everything. Original ledgers, bank trails, even Easton's emails. But the part that matters most isn't about him." He handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a document stamped confidential adoption record. My name was on it. My heart stopped. "What is this?" "Thomas Hale wasn't your biological father," Alden said quietly. "He adopted you after your real father, a man named Michael Lang, was imprisoned for corporate embezzlement connected to that same fraud case. Thomas never told you because he wanted you to grow up clean, untainted by another man's mistakes. But Easton knew. That's why he targeted you. You were living proof of everything he'd buried." For a moment, the room tilted. The walls felt closer. Everything I thought I'd rebuilt, everything I thought I'd understood, my legacy, my bloodline, my name, was suddenly in question. "He lied to protect you," Alden said gently. "And I'm telling you this so you can stop running from ghosts that aren't yours." When I left his house, the sun was setting over the lake. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt. I wasn't angry. I wasn't broken. Just hollow, the kind of emptiness that only truth can leave behind. By the time I reached Chicago, I knew what I had to do. I gathered the evidence Alden gave me and took it to Hannah, the journalist. "You want the full story?" I said. "This is it. Every name, every lie." My father wasn't the villain or the saint. He was both. But this ends now, she nodded slowly. This will change everything. Good, I said. It's time it did. 2 days later, the Tribune published a follow-up expose. The forgotten truth behind the Easton Hale scandal. A son's redemption. It spread faster than I expected. The comments poured in, not pity but respect. People saw the complexity, the humanity, and for the first time, my father's name wasn't tied to corruption. It was tied to courage. But that night, as I locked up the clinic, I found Claire standing outside with our daughter. Both of them were crying. Lila stepped forward. Mom told me everything. I don't care what blood says, Dad. You're the only father I've ever had. I hugged her. And for a long moment, everything, the years of loss, anger, guilt, just dissolved. But behind them, across the street, a black car idled. A man inside raised a phone, snapped a photo, and drove off. I thought the truth had set me free, but someone else had just been watching, waiting for the right moment to make sure it didn't. For a week, I pretended that the black car hadn't happened. I threw myself into the clinic. Early mornings, long nights, anything to avoid thinking about what it meant. But somewhere deep down, I knew it wasn't over. People with that much power don't vanish just because a newspaper says they should. 3 nights later, as I was closing up, a shadow moved past the glass door. Then a knock, soft, deliberate. I opened it to find a man in a charcoal suit, clean-shaven, holding a leather briefcase. His eyes were the kind that never blinked too much. Cold, observant, professional. Dr. Hale? Yes, he handed me a card. Denton & Co., Legal Affairs. We represent a few remaining interests connected to the late Judge Easton's estate, he said. There are matters that need closure. Could we talk somewhere private? I gestured to my office. He walked in, closed the door, and sat like he owned the place. Let's get to it, I said. He opened the briefcase, sliding a folder across the desk. Judge Easton kept records. Personal journals, correspondence, financial accounts. Some of them mention your father and your recent revelations. Our firm was asked to safeguard them until his death. I flipped the folder open. Inside were scanned pages written in Easton's handwriting. Angry, looping, meticulous. One entry read, Thomas Hale thought he could undo what we built. I let him live long enough to learn he couldn't. Another line dated a week before my father's death. If the boy ever comes looking, remind him that blood and guilt flow from the same vein. I looked up. Why are you showing me this? The lawyer adjusted his tie. Because the people who funded Easton's early campaigns, the ones your articles exposed, don't want their names connected to this scandal. They're prepared to offer a settlement, substantial. He slid a check across the desk. I didn't look at the amount. What's the condition? Simple, he said. You stop talking. No more interviews, no more documents, no more digging into the past. You let the dead stay dead. I leaned back, staring at him. You think this is about money? He gave a small, practiced smile. Everything's about money, Dr. Hale. You of all people should know that. I didn't respond. I stood, walked to the window, and looked down at the clinic's entrance. Lila and Claire were outside, laughing with a nurse. For the first time in years, they looked like family again. When I turned back, I said quietly, You tell whoever sent you that if they come near this place, or my family or again, I'll hand everything I have to every reporter in this city. You understand? He studied me for a moment, then closed the folder and stood. That would be unwise, maybe, I said, but I'm not afraid of unwise anymore. He hesitated, then walked out, leaving the check on the desk. I stared at it for a long moment, then tore it in half and dropped it into the trash. That night I called Marcus. If anything happens to me, I said, you send copies of every file to Hannah Lee at the Tribune. He sighed. You really think they'll come after you? I don't think, I said. I know, for days nothing happened. Then one evening, as I was locking the clinic gate, I saw the black car again. This time it didn't stop. It just slowed down long enough for the window to roll halfway down. Man's voice called out, calm and measured. You should have taken the deal. Then it drove off. I didn't sleep that night. But instead of fear, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Defiance. The next morning, I called a press conference at the clinic. Cameras crowded the small hallway. Reporters asked questions about Easton's network, about my father's death, about the threats. I didn't give them names or details. I just said one thing. The only thing I inherited from my father was conscience. And I'm not selling that to anyone. It was risky, maybe even reckless, but it worked. Within days, the attention made it impossible for anyone to move against me quietly. The same men who'd sent lawyers and shadows started backing away. Silence became their only option. A month later, the clinic received an anonymous donation, 7 figures. No note, no name. Just a single word typed in the memo line. Enough. I knew what it meant. They wanted peace, and for once I was willing to give it. Claire kept working at the clinic. Lila started helping on weekends. Slowly, the walls between us began to crumble. We never talked about the past in detail. Some wounds don't need retelling, but the air felt lighter. One evening, as we were closing up, Lila asked, "Dad, do you ever wish it all hadn't happened?" The lies, the loss. I thought for a long time before answering. "No," I said, "because it showed me who I am when there's nothing left to prove." She smiled faintly, and for the first time, I saw a reflection of peace in her eyes. Something I hadn't seen since before she could even understand what her family had gone through. I watched her walk out with Claire, the two of them laughing, their shadows stretching across the streetlight. For the first time in years, the silence around me didn't feel like punishment. It felt like closure. But just as I turned off the lights, a letter slid under the door. The same handwriting as before, only 4 words this time. "It's not over yet." The words "it's not over yet" stayed on my desk all night like a ghost refusing to leave. I didn't tell anyone, not Claire, not Lila, not Marcus. I'd learned that fear loses its power when you stop feeding it. Still, I couldn't shake the question. What was left unfinished? By morning, I decided to find out. The envelope had a faint postmark, Riverdale, Illinois, a small industrial town 2 hours south. I drove there after my last surgery rotation, not sure if I was chasing truth or just the echo of one. The return address led to a quiet street of half-abandoned buildings. The one I was looking for used to be a community hall. Inside, the air smelled of dust and rusted pipes. I called out, "Hello?" A voice came from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come." A figure stepped forward, older, pale, cautious. It took a second for my eyes to adjust. It was Dr. Jonathan Alden. "You sent the note," I said. He nodded slowly. "I thought it was over. But there's one more piece, Ryan. Something you need to see before you think this is all buried." He handed me an old tape recorder and pressed play. My father's voice filled the room, weary but steady. "If you're hearing this, it means the truth didn't die with me." I knew Easton wasn't acting alone. He was covering for someone higher. The money, the manipulation, the hospital contracts, all led to one name, Lang. Michael Lang. My blood ran cold. "Lang?" Alden looked at me. "Your biological father." On the tape, my father's voice continued. "I took his son to break the chain. To raise him right. But if Lang ever resurfaces, Ryan needs to know. Not to hate him, but to finish what I couldn't." The tape clicked off. The silence after was deafening. Alden said quietly, "Lang didn't die in prison like the papers said. He was released 6 years ago under a new identity. He's still out there, and he's the one who's been watching you." I felt the room spin. Why? Maybe guilt. Maybe fear. Maybe both. The next few days blurred together. Every noise outside my apartment sounded like footsteps. Every call from an unknown number made my stomach tighten. But by the 3rd night, I was done being afraid. I found him, a man named Michael Lane, similar enough to Lang to hide in plain sight. He lived outside Joliet, working at a repair shop under a different name. When I walked in, he was under a car, humming to himself. He crawled out, saw me, and froze. We looked at each other for a long time, 2 men who shared blood but not history. "I knew this day would come," he said quietly. "I guess so," I replied. "Why send people after me?" "Why now?" He shook his head. "I didn't send anyone. The men who funded Easton's rise, they're still out there. I warned you because I knew what they'd do to protect themselves. I tried to stop it once and lost everything. Your father gave you my second chance. I just wanted to make sure you didn't waste it." There was no anger in his tone, just regret. I stood there, trying to feel something, rage, closure, anything, but all I felt was tired. "I'm not you," I said finally. And I won't spend my life cleaning up your sins. He nodded, eyes wet. Good. Then you're already better than both of us. I turned to leave, but he called after me. Ryan, your father didn't just build that foundation for redemption. He built it because he believed that the best way to destroy corruption was to outlast it. You're doing that. Don't stop now. When I got back to Chicago, the clinic lights were still on. Claire was finishing charts. Leela was wiping down the counters, humming off-key. For the first time, the place felt alive, like more than a building, more than a name. I sat in my office, the tape recorder still in my hand. I pressed play one last time, just to hear his voice. If you ever lose your way, son, remember, truth outlasts power, but only if someone is brave enough to carry it. I turned it off, leaned back, and let the quiet settle. Outside, the city hummed. Car horns, footsteps, laughter. Life moving forward. Finally, so was I. The next morning, I renamed the foundation the Hale Lang Center for Renewal. Not as forgiveness, but as acknowledgement. 2 legacies, 1 purpose. Claire smiled when she saw the new sign. You're really letting it go, aren't you? I nodded. It's the only way it ends. Months passed. The threats faded, the press moved on, the city forgot. But the clinic grew stronger. Every day, new faces walked in, and every night. I left knowing that maybe my father's faith in redemption wasn't misplaced. The last line of his letter still hangs framed in my office. This is where the Hales begin again. He was wrong about one thing, though. It wasn't just the Hales who began again, it was me. Sometimes life breaks you so it can rebuild you with stronger hands. Not to fix what's lost, but to finally understand what was worth saving all along.